We are the fastest growing community in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
There are probably more students in school in Plymouth now than there were people when I was living here or when I was born here.
It's grown over time with various groups coming for different reasons.
You can really feel the history everywhere.
It's just absolutely amazing that 100 men, English men and women, got on this boat and came here.
This is our one shot in our generation, or for several generations, to really make an impact and put Plymouth back in the, focus of Americans.
(1620), a year solidified in history that transcribes a variety of significant events. It marks the date of settlement for English voyagers in search of religious freedom. It pioneered the basic fundamentals of American democracy. And it founded one of the most diverse and culturally unique towns in the country, Plymouth, Massachusetts. With the quadricentennial anniversary fast approaching, the residents making up Plymouth look to honor the rich past it holds. Whether by being involved in government, economics, recreation, or culture, Plymouth has been coming together to reflect 400 years of history. In order to understand what has made America's hometown into the community it is today, we must travel back centuries to a time of religious persecution.
Well, with Plymouth, I think you do have to go back to 1620, and that's the logical starting point.
Mr. Clark has been a teacher at Plymouth North High School for over 24 years in a variety of courses pertaining to both American and European history. His post-secondary education has allowed him to accumulate extensive knowledge in history, especially involving the grassroots of English settlement with the Pilgrims.
That first winter was just brutal. Half of them died in the cold first winter after a couple of months.
Voyaging to a new land was a sacrifice many of the Pilgrims were willing to make as they sought to seek religious freedom from the Church of England. The Pilgrims' journey began when they detached themselves from England and settled in Holland, located in the Netherlands. However, with difficulty adapting to the urban environment, the Pilgrims sought to completely separate themselves from the Old World by voyaging across the Atlantic to the Virginia coastline. Unfortunately, the strong headwinds of the Gulf Stream set the Mayflower off course by hundreds of miles until the Pilgrims eventually docked in present-day Provincetown and eventually to Plymouth. Adaptation to their new environment was challenging, especially during the winter months, but one group was able to offer assistance in the successes of the Plymouth colony.
You have to give a great deal of respect to the natives that were here. Without their kind of guidance and help and teaching them how to grow things and hunt and basically survive. They who knows, it may not have been the first permanent colony.
Today, tourists from around the world are able to reflect on the foundation of American society. Pilgrim Hall Museum and Plymouth Plantation both offer exhibits of 17th century culture, whether through physical artifacts or recreations of Pilgrim and Native society.
There were a group of people who got together in 1818 to 1819, getting ready for the bicentennial of the founding of Plymouth colony. And they put their money where their mouths were and their interest, and they built this building in 1824. And so it's the longest operating museum in the country since 1824. It's always been a museum.
Located in the center of Plymouth, Pilgrim Hall Museum allows spectators to view various artifacts of Pilgrim and Native American descent.
We have household items, we have some weaponry, we have beautiful history paintings that were interpretations of the Pilgrim story as we got into the 19th century. So people looking back at our heritage were suddenly in the 1800s interested in producing an interpretation of that story.
Not too far from Pilgrim Hall, Plymouth Plantation offers live action exhibits during the spring, summer, and fall months that tell the story of Pilgrim and Native American life in the 17th century.
Plymouth Plantation opened in 1947, so we've been here now. This is our 72nd season. We'll be starting this year. Our mission has always been to sort of being a place where visitors can come and see how the people of the 17th century lived their daily lives. So instead of reading about them in a book, here you can do those sort of things, but you can also then go see how they built their houses, how they lived in communities, how they structured their societies, how they lived and worked in close proximity to each other, and how those decisions that were made in the 17th century has shaped our society today.
Perhaps one of the most important artifacts from the 17th century was the Mayflower Compact, drafted aboard the Mayflower as the Pilgrims were about to land in unfamiliar territory. The words transcribed by the passengers aboard sealed the foundations for the first English colony in the New World.
It's such an important body of work that was done with all these different people. It's not like all the people on the Mayflower were there for the same reasons. So there were just a group of diverse people that, with different ideas anyway, that put together this document that really has its roots in our own democracy. It was basically the government of Plymouth.
As the ideas of American democracy was bestowed upon the settlers of the North American coastline, Plymouth began to grow and expand from 124 people in 1624 to 7,000 by the end of the 17th century. While many tend to remember Plymouth from the story of the first Thanksgiving, it is important also to recognize the inspirations for the diverse place Plymouth is today by looking at the industrial age of the 1800s.
This is another important part of Plymouth. Like, I would start in 1620, but you also, we need to remember that Plymouth was an industrial town at one point.
It was a time of immigration where people in Europe were looking to the opportunities that they would have in the United States at the time.
Industrialization was a unique time across the world as people began to change their ways of life forever. With the invention of the steam engine and manufacturing through large factories, Plymouth was no exception to this rapid change in technology. Manufacturing industries such as the Plymouth Cordage Company brought not only industrialization to the town, but changes in the demographics as well.
It attracted people from all over the world, and this is what adds to Plymouth's uniqueness, its diversity. People coming here, working together, speaking different languages, getting along. It really makes it an even more special place, I think.
Employment throughout the industrial sections of town allowed Plymouth to grow throughout the 19th and early stages of the 20th century, adding an additional 8,000 people to the community in 100 years. But the town had yet to experience its exponential explosion in population. Major cities surrounding the New England area drew in larger crowds as they offered better ports, more businesses, and better transportation. It wasn't until the 1950s where shifts in urban lifestyle began to occur.
We are the fastest growing community in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
With over 48 years of political experience, Ken Tavares represents the executive leadership of Plymouth, along with the 4 other selectmen in the town. In addition to assisting in the well-being of Plymouth, Ken has also been a longtime resident and has witnessed the rapid development that has occurred in his lifetime.
The downtown is perhaps the most significant area to change. The downtown was, when I was growing up, had a lot of clothing stores and grocery stores and hardware stores, and now it's been turning towards more entertainment and restaurants.
Alongside Ken, Michael Bastoni, an engineering teacher at Plymouth North High School, had also been raised in America's hometown from his childhood, and he is able to describe the exceptional changes he's seen during the late 20th century.
I'll put it this way, when I was a kid in Plymouth, there were 3 traffic lights. There was one at the town post office, there was one on Samoset Street, and then there was one in North Plymouth.
Following the slight influx in population seen from the industrialization across the harbor, the population of the town remained relatively stable at around 13,000 people. But as housing became more affordable and the population in suburbia was on the rise in the 1950s, the town of Plymouth experienced a skyrocket in population, particularly during the 1970s in the western sections of town.
All of West Plymouth was woods. There were no houses in West Plymouth. I went to school at Sacred Heart for 10 years, and we would drive out there, and once we left the town, the center of Plymouth, and headed down Route 80, there were no houses. Plymouth probably grew in the number of houses more percentage-wise than in any other period.
Today, while the overall rates have slightly declined, new development continues in the southern sections of town, including the Pine Hills and Cedarville. Meanwhile, retail and apartment complexes are recently being constructed throughout the proximities of the town to accommodate the nearly 60,000 residents Plymouth holds today.
We have lots of resources here that are very attractive to people. It's one of the reasons that I've come back. I moved away from Plymouth for a long period of time. Lived in the Virgin Islands for 12 years. But I came back here because Plymouth is a particularly beautiful town that offers an awful lot of amenities.
From 1620 to 2020, Plymouth has a unique history reflected with each passing century. December 22, 1769 marked the first significant commemoration of the Pilgrims. The newly founded local holiday was titled Forefathers' Day and was celebrated throughout the town of Plymouth. 1820 marked a larger bicentennial commemoration, as both Pilgrim Hall Museum and the current town hall opened that same decade. However, it wasn't until the 300th anniversary where the commemorations began to take on a more national scale. Pilgrim spirit represented an important part of the two-year event, as up to 100,000 people spectated in the reenactment of Pilgrim and Wampanoag history. President Warren G. Harding himself attended the commemoration, showcasing the national attention of the tricentennial anniversary. With the quadricentennial commemoration fast approaching, the town has spent the past decade planning what will be taking place. Plymouth 400, led by Michele Pecoraro, is a nonprofit organization that has contributed to organizing important events taking place in 2020.
I have a staff here of 3.5 people, full-time and part-time. We have a whole cadre of volunteers and business partners, but mostly I am strategically oriented, so the strategic planning for all of this year-long commemoration.
Michele hopes to bring in strong economic development in 2020 through tourism. She, along with the organization, desires to address the full story of the first successful English colony through both English and native perspective.
I think one of the things that's going to make this a big commemoration is the fact that we are working for the first time with Wampanoag people. Never have we introduced the voice of the native people. Their story has been told by other people in the past, and this is the first commemoration of its kind about this history of Plymouth Colony, where the native voice is very strong and equally heard.
There will be 7 major events depicting significant points in Pilgrim and Wampanoag history, each of which can be accessed on Plymouth 400's website for more information.
Well, the opening ceremony is April 24th in 2020, and that will be where where we'll invite celebrity and heads of state, etc. That will be very formal, kind of pomp and circumstance. We will have a military presence, a parade of, military units that are in there. And the other one is the Maritime Festival, which is a great event and will be a first time ever event here in Plymouth. And that will entail, like I said, tall ships and a parade of lights and a salute, to the Plymouth Colony and the Mayflower Voyage. And then our Illuminate Thanksgiving, which we do currently alongside the parade, the America's Hometown Thanksgiving celebration, which is a wonderful partnership we have with the parade. And so we have Illuminate Thanksgiving, which is a youth-oriented event, and it's all about giving thanks and giving back to your community, to your country, and to your world. We actually have a couple of native events that are strictly native events. There's an Ancestors Walk that will happen here in August of 2020, and that will be where the tribes will come together. They'll honor the 69 villages that were here in the 1600s. And then the second thing that we are doing as an event is a Wampanoag History Conference, or in this case we're kind of expanding that to a Native History Conference, which will be held at Bridgewater State University. That is another unprecedented kind of conference that nobody's really done to this in this way before.
In order to prepare for the commemoration, estimated to draw 3.5 million tourists and spectators, Plymouth 400 works closely with an army of local volunteers, along with having close ties to the local, state, and national government.
We work very closely with the town government here and the select board and the town manager. You know, we keep them all apprised of the plans.
I'm an ex-officio member of all of the committees that are under the 400th. So it's my job to be informed, to make sure that the wishes of the board of directors and the executive committee are carried out, and to assist the staff wherever possible.
On the state level, we are funded in part by the state. We are also working with the state through a state commission that was commissioned by Governor Baker in 2016. So that state commission, we actually report up to them, and they help us to manage things like, you know, getting into state offices to talk to people about specific things. On the federal level, you know, the harbor here in Plymouth hasn't been dredged since 1952. Made it very difficult for any sort of large boat to come in. Now it's being dredged thanks to $14 million that was appropriated on the federal level.
With the opening ceremony now under 1 year away, Plymouth 400 is looking forward to adding a new chapter in the modern history of Plymouth. But when the commemoration concludes, the impacts it leaves on Plymouth may last well into the future.
This is our one shot in our generation, or for several generations, to really make an impact and put Plymouth back in the, you know, focus of Americans.
It actually highlights our history as a community and also as a nation, and what's been built from that small band of 102 people coming ashore in 1620.
I think the celebration is going to be a great one. It's going to really highlight Plymouth's diversity. It's going to talk about Plymouth's history. It's going to commemorate all aspects of the people and their.
Beginning with 102 passengers docking off the Mayflower amongst a cold winter's day, Plymouth has become a diverse town, rich with culture and full of community members willing to help ensure that residents and tourists can look back on its unique history. One can hope that this tradition should continue in the coming years and into the eventual 500th anniversary in the 22nd century.